So hi everybody, my name's Toni and I'm a lecturer at the School of Land Management and Development, but my real specialty is GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and what I want to do today is actually try to sell GIS to all of you, unless you're already avid users. Okay, GIS actually got a start in the late 1960s, but it's really taken off in the last little while because there's a lot of interest as a result of Google Maps and Google Earth. A lot of people are interested in geography, and they think sometimes when they're using these kinds of systems on the internet that they're actually using GIS, but they're not. Google Maps, Google Earth, these are viewers that use Geographic Information System data. And there are a lot of industries who actually do use GIS. So a lot of different businesses, government agencies, public safety has a really important component with GIS, as we know with disaster recovery and with the PACE program down on the lower campus. And education uses GIS too. But I'm sad to say that it has not infiltrated the world of education as much as I believe it could. And USP is an example of that. Since 2006, we've had over 125 licenses of GIS on the campus, but they are not very widely used. And since June of this year, we've had the capability for every student on the campus to have in excess of $50,000 US on every computer that's here of GIS software. And again, it's not being used. But USP is not alone in that. There's been a number of studies done with education institutes in different countries trying to figure out why it's not working, why it's not spreading. Yap did a study in Singapore in 2008. He said that GIS was introduced into the schools 10 years before, training and software. 90% believed that it would be useful to be using it in the classrooms, but it was only being used by a few. Lam, similarly, he did a study in 2009 in Hong Kong where they tried to put GIS into all of their schools. 96% received training, 32% said they used it, and only 37% said they had confidence in using it. And what he thought, what he believed was, it was the way that the training took place and that the teachers, as a result of learning by rote and learning without any kind of framework, didn't have any confidence, and they forgot most of what they had learned as soon as they actually learned it. Demirci in 2008 did a study in Turkey, and in Turkey they've tried really hard to get GIS into various different school programs. The software is there, the training is there, but not only do people not use it, many of them say they don't even know what it is. What Demirci was saying was he looked at what the uptake in education was in developed nations like in the UK and in the US, in fact all of North America, and realized that GIS wasn't being used very widely in education there, and asked, well, what hope do developing countries have as a result? So if we put GIS aside for a minute and just talk about what's going on with learning, there's a person whose name is Phil Gersmal, and Phil Gersmal is a geographer. So he wanted to study how people learned about geography because he thought that that might be useful. And normally when we think about geography, we think about where something is, so the location. Well, what Gersmal did was he looked into the neuroscience of the brain. So he researched over 900 articles about neuroscience, and he developed taxonomies of brain centers that are mutually exclusive that he said this is the way people learn spatially. And when he looked at these kinds of things that people needed in order to understand location and geography, he said things like, if I know where something already is, I automatically put it and compare it to what I'm learning now and compare it with what I have just learned. He said things like auras, that helps us with learning. Things like putting what we just learned into a regional perspective, into hierarchies. Also thinking about transitions between areas. if you considered the ocean deep to shallow, low to high, or he considered a bike rider, that a bike rider automatically knows the transition is really important from one place to another because you can have that hill. He thought about analogies. So if I know that something is the case in one place, would it be the same in another place? And things like association. Maybe there's deserts on one west coast, so would it be in all the west coasts? And finally, pattern. What Gersmal said and what he found was that durable learning is most likely to occur when the brain takes advantage of more than one center. So if we take all of these centers and we focus on those centers, that we get more durable learning. And what he also found was that these centers don't develop in sophistication, that you go from one center to the next as your learning level increases, that in fact very young children actually use all of these centers. He said, it's important for us to be thinking, even though he's a geographer, it's important for everybody to be thinking in spatial terms because thinking spatially improves all of our learning and thinking skills. So early research has shown that when we develop our spatial abilities, that it improves our language skills and that it improves our math skills as well. He suggests that if teachers consciously focus on the neurological underpinnings of spatial thinking, we would be able to design better classes, deliver material more effectively, and assess learning. Now, another person who's interested in learning and teaching is David Jonasson, and he's written some books about modeling with technology. What Jonasson believes, and what the previous lecture was talking about, is that when we understand something, we are able to explain it. So what Jonasson says, if we can take our knowledge and we can make a model of our knowledge, put it down on a piece of paper, it shows that we really understand what it is that we're talking about. And once we put that model down on a piece of paper, that we would be able to look for gaps or look for things where we had probably made mistakes. And further on, as our learning increased, we could add to our model. Well, we could do that mentally, we could do it on paper, but what Jonasson suggests is that we should use technical tools, we should use software. And one of the pieces of software, he says, that helps us with modeling is a database. Another thing he suggests is the use of concept maps. So taking elements of what we know and connecting them so that we can make a concept map and model our knowledge. Spreadsheets work as well. Using hypermedia, animations to illustrate and model what it is that we know, and expert systems. Jonasson started talking about visualization as a way to model our knowledge, and that's when he started talking about GIS, because in his mind, GIS is primarily a mapping tool. Make a map, that's a visual representation of what it is that we know. But if I wanted to model what Gersmal was saying, I would say, here I've got these 8 centers of the brain, and in order to understand spatial thinking better, I'm going to apply my 8 centers to the world. If I model what Jonasson says, I take the mind tools, what he calls mind tools, these pieces of technology in which I can make models, and if I filter the world through my mind tools, then I'm going to be able to understand things better. But what I think Jonasson missed or didn't say is that geographic information systems actually have an element of all of the mind tools that Jonasson brings up. So for example, they have databases, they have spreadsheet functionality, they have a visualization component, you can make concept maps in them, they are expert systems, and you can create hypermedia. And similarly with Jonasson, we can model our domain knowledge using GIS, but we can also model the software system itself. And if we did that, we can learn how to learn with technology. So why might this not work? Well, first let's think about why we want to do it. We want here at USP, and we've been talking about using technology in the classroom, because we know that it helps us accelerate manual processes, it provides a common language, It allows for collaboration, so I can collaborate with universities across the world. And it allows for the use of large data sets. People say they're drowning in data, and now we're starting to collect more and more data over time. When we use software, we can put our knowledge into the software and uncover patterns that maybe we didn't see before. But what stands in the way? Well, Jonathan, one of the things he says is that educational technologists have spent decades trying to make technologies act like teachers, but technologies are lousy teachers. And what happens is, we often try to teach the technology in absence of applying it to something. Another thing that sometimes makes difficulty for us when we're trying to teach is that we often teach as we were taught. So if we were taught using the lecture method, we tend to teach with the lecture method. And Huber and Fried have pointed out that the person who stands up at the front and has put all of the lecture together, sequenced it beautifully, updated it frequently, they know the most in the classroom. But the students are just sitting there as passive recipients, and they're not actually learning what it is that the lecturer is delivering to them until they are forced to learn because of an assessment. Frequently, when we learn to use software, we get a cookbook. It says, here, follow these instructions. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And at the end, what you've learned is you are really good at following instructions. But that's just about it. So Lee and Bednar's, in their study, they said that the students found out that it tells you what to click on, very basic. You go bang, 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 you turn it in. And when it comes time for you to actually do it, you don't remember and you don't know because you never really learned it to begin with. So one alternative to this would be constructivism, using that modeling technique, having the students actually construct their learning as they go on. But you'd be surprised at the resistance of students to doing this, because now it's not the lecturer just telling them, it's them having to do the work, and it's very difficult for them. Another thing that Huber and Fried brought up in their book was that if everybody did this together, if we all worked together at the university and said, you will construct your knowledge, the way STAR is having this initiative, we will do these things, it makes it easier for all of us. And it will also make it easier for the students if we model what it is that we want them to learn. So my suggestion to you is that you learn to use GIS using a different method. Then you use that method yourself to teach it, and that we'll use GIS technology to assist with learning how to learn. Thank you.